But yes, let's welcome in Jordan, Rodrigo, and Erik. Awesome. Hey, what's going on, guys? How are you? Can you guys hear
Great.
okay?
Great. Yeah.
Good, yeah.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Thank you. Yeah, hey, Erik. Good to see you. Thank you so much, guys, for joining in. Excited for this next section. We're going to be doing a fireside chat. Rodrigo has some questions prepared, and love to get in the weeds about x402, A2A, all the cool stuff that you guys have been building, and all the collaboration we've been doing, and we're really excited. So thank you so much. I'll let you speak.
All right. Great. Thanks again for joining, guys. So, Erik, I wanted to get a little bit of like the backstory since you're like kind of authored the thing. So, like, what was like the genesis, and is it something you like just cranked out in a weekend, or like what was the story?
Yeah, this is a great question that actually I don't think anyone has asked me yet. So this is
Yeah.
the first time I tell this story. So
Yeah, I'd love to hear.
I had been thinking about this prior to rejoining Coinbase. I rejoined Coinbase back in January, and I'd say October or November of last year. I was thinking about what should I spend my time doing, and it occurred to me like it's probably the right time with stablecoins and cheap L2s and cheap L1s to try this whole payments on the internet thing again. And I was very aware of like past attempts to have done it. Like there's attempts in 2015 and 2016, and there's like a W3C initiative, and there was L402, and there's not X402 is not the first attempt to solve this problem. And I actually almost a year ago exactly now spent a couple weeks like going through and reading all of the specs and trying to form an opinion as to why each one didn't catch when it was proposed. And then I considered like starting my own company to pursue this, but I kind of figured that as a startup, it's very difficult to push a open standard and an open spec because you need consensus and you need kind of weight driving that consensus. And if you're a startup, all of your incentives are to like profit off of the thing that you make. And so it's really hard to do like open standards when you also have like a venture backed mandate to capitalize on that standard. And at the same time, Coinbase was asking if I wanted to come back to rejoin and lead engineering at Coinbase Developer Platform. One of the interviewers on my panel was Brian Armstrong. I actually mentioned to Brian Armstrong that I'd been thinking about this. The context is he had asked me like, if you were running CDP, like what would you do? What do you think the most valuable thing to do would be for CDP? And I said I think it's time to finally solve payments on the internet, and kind of ran him through my like last couple months of thinking about this problem. Uh, and he said, actually, there's like a next bet that someone proposed. Coinbase has this internal program called Next Bets where people can pitch ideas, and then it's kind of like startups within the company. Um, Someone had pitched a somewhat similar idea, very different implementation. And so when I rejoined, I read that Next Bet. Namil Dalal and I decided to fund that next bet, but pivot the approach and have me be the DRI. And then I took all the thoughts that I had from several months of research and spent a weekend and coded the X402 spec and clients and full implementation, and then showed up on Monday, and it like worked end to end, and I made a few tweaks to my weekend design before releasing the 1.0. But yeah, that's the lore.
Wow. So it's kind of like show up Monday, like, hey, look what I did this weekend.
Yeah, but that weekend is when I had the concept of a facilitator, and that it needed to be gasless, and that you needed signature based, and you needed kind of different logical mechanisms like schemes, like all of those are things that were like in my head prior to that weekend. And so it was kind of, that's the weekend I took those ideas and turned it into code.
So it was like the culmination of a lot of hours like thinking about it, and then it just like sat down in a intense session and got it down.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it.
That's awesome. And then so When was that again? Was it like or it was like February, January, like earlier this year?
Yeah, that was I think it was first week of February, maybe second week of February, and then we tweaked it a little bit internally. x402.org actually has existed since like late February as a website. And our goal was to have it ready to show people and start getting input at ETH Denver. And so there was like a number of people who saw it at ETH Denver, and that's when
Was it ETH
x402.org.
Denver?
Sorry?
It was at ETH Denver.
It was, yeah. It wasn't like a thing we were advertising, but it was a thing like, if I'm having a conversation with someone who I thought would think it was really cool, I would break out a laptop and show them a demo and break
Oh,
down
but
the
you didn't
concept.
have like you didn't like get up on stage. Okay, got it.
No. There was no like, it was too late to like pitch a talk on it, given it was built in February. But yeah, we were kind of like at the booth showing people the everything, and yeah, it went to mainnet right at ETH Denver, and it's been live ever since.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so we caught wind of it shortly thereafter, I think, when the announcement was made. So, like, I'll just give the backstory on ampersend because it is somewhat relevant. So, it actually began at like I had a pool day up in Napa with some friends, and my friend's fiance is high up at NVIDIA, and he's like super smart AI person, and we were just like talking, and this was like around like January, February, because nothing had like come out yet, and he was talking about how the people at NVIDIA, they're all AI people, but they're like, they don't get crypto and like Web3, and like, what's the point? But he's like, but I do see how with agent payments, like that makes perfect sense for crypto. And he's like, who's working on that? And this was like February, and I was like, you know what? Like, that's a really good point. And like, I don't know. And I said, I'm going to do some research. So we like, after that, just spent weeks just looking around for what was out there, and nothing had been announced yet. Like, x402 wasn't out yet, Google A2A. And we were talking internally about it, like, okay, this is going to be huge. I mean, we were shocked at like nothing, Stripe, Visa, like this is going to be a multi-trillion-dollar thing. Like, what's going on? And we talked internally about it, like, okay, we were going to do our own, like, what would this system look like? And then x402 hit, and we're like, oh, okay, there it is. And then shortly thereafter, I think A2A came out, or it might have been in a different order, but we're like, okay, like the big guns are coming to this, and yeah, here it is. But then, so as we looked into how we could get involved in the space, exploring different like business models and whatnot. So anytime you deal with funds, like you become like an intermediary and like handling funds, you enter into this world of like money transmitter laws, which are like, there's a different law and jurisdiction for every state, and you have to get licensing, and it's like tens of millions of dollars, and it's like a huge legal thing. And so we're like, oh, that's not going to work. So that's the game for like people like Coinbase and like big banks and stuff to get into that game, because it's a whole regulatory world. So we're thinking like, how can
that's
we...
actually, not to interrupt you, Rodrigo, but I think that's actually one of the things that was one of the main design decisions and like things that we designed the facilitator spec in order to do, and why you see me kind of like constantly pushing back on the repo on like the shape and how things are implemented in different schemes and on different networks, is because there's like a pretty clear what makes you a money transmitter and what doesn't remove you from flow of fund, or what removes you from flow of funds, right?
Right.
And there's like a whole set of like, I had to walk so many lawyers within Coinbase through the design of the facilitator, and it takes that was really the thing that prevented us from getting to mainnet like at ETH Denver, was just making sure that we had done the analysis and made sure that we're not doing something that would put anybody accidentally in flow of funds if they wanted to operate a facilitator. And so, I think we feel relatively good in our. I feel pretty good in the legal team's analysis of it. I don't want to speak for our legal team, but yeah,
No,
that is like a huge constraint that you need to kind of work with as you're building these kind of agentic payment systems.
100%. I'm glad we got on that point because it is hugely important. And yeah, I know in the design of the facilitator, it's like limited what they can do, and there's like no fun. They don't like hold funds or anything. And so, same thing with us. We had our GC and like our early design meetings, and like, okay, how can we do this? Because with the deferred scheme, there's like the sense of like escrow, and we're like, okay, well, who's going to hold the escrow funds? And like, and he's like, no, that's not going to work. Like, well, what if it's in a smart contract and like we don't custody it? And he's like, I don't. So yeah, we went through many iterations of like trying to make it work. And so that's where we landed on like developing tools then for people building agents for like observability and reputation, all that stuff, adjunct things that are part of this huge ecosystem without being like an actual like payment money transmitter facilitator. So yeah, that was an interesting exercise, and you can see how it involves all disciplines, like not just like engineering, but like legal and making something happen.
Totally, and I do think that we're going to get that deferred implementation across the line. I know I'm a few days late on a review. It is, as you can imagine, I started reviewing it right before x402 kind of blew up, and I've been a little swamped since.
I'm
But
sure.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm sure your
I
world
do
has
really
been
want us to get there
upside down.
because, like, we at CDP want to use it. We want to like use the deferred scheme in the same way everyone else does for some of our data APIs and others of our products. And you have these products that you want to charge like $1 per million requests kind of level, not a tenth of a cent level, and we need a
Yeah,
way to service those use cases with x402. And so, but it requires like security review, it requires legal analysis, it requires implementation analysis. You got to think through like the product experience of both the client who's going to access or use and make payments, and you need to think about the product experiences of the server who's going to accept payments. It is like there's just a lot of complexity that goes into these schemes and these like implementations of x402 in order to make them actually usable and good. And that is like that's why it took me like 3 or 4 months of just thinking about it in the background in order to like have a strong opinion on how some of these things should work. And so far, I'd like to think that some of my design decisions have held up pretty well to this like $3 million spike in the last week.
yeah, yeah. That is helpful context for those people listening that are like building stuff. Like just to be aware, when you're coming from something from like a huge corporate angle and like a huge thing, like how much thought and background goes into it. And yeah, so that's helpful insight. So yeah, like on the Google side, Jordan, actually it would be interesting to hear kind of like similarly like the behind the scenes story of like how your entry point into A2A and all this.
Um, yeah, A2A was announced, and our team is the Cloud Web 3 team within Google, and we immediately started kind of thinking about how payments would be done in this situation, and how like we could get involved. And we had also known about the X402, and then immediately saw this as like a very compatible like formats that would like kind of like meet this need like immediately. And I mean, there are like alternative routes as well, as like getting like an API key or something and having your agent send that back and forth. But like in like a large like agent network, it doesn't make sense for you to like maybe try to set up this API or register with all these agents. So like the X402 like protocol really kind of like solved that, and like had it a very straightforward way to keep the transaction fees down as well. So like if these agents are working on a bunch of different small tasks, like obviously like a basic card transaction is just going to be like infeasible in this situation. So the X402 route seemed like pretty like a clear, strong use case for this. And so then we reached out to Coinbase and kind of started like jamming on different sessions together on how we think this would flow and what this would look like. And yeah, continue to grow it into a form of payment that the agents could use, and then our payments team also kind of like worked alongside to kind of use some of the concepts to develop the intent and mandate system as well. So um, standard provider, like payment providers, could also feel comfortable with this flow too.
Yeah, do you remember the like timing of it, like when Google started like thinking about it or was working on it? Was it and so Google in parallel was like thinking about this independently, and then Coinbase announced, and then that's when you guys like worked together. Was that kind of like the timeline, or do you remember?
I think Coinbase announced early, and then we announced A to A in April, and then I think in May is when we began discussions with
Okay.
Coinbase to try to like see how these parts could fit together.
So in your A2A, in the thought process, Google and you guys were already thinking about like a payments portion with A2A, right? Independently of X402, and then you came together and then said, okay, how can these like be complementary?
Right, exactly.
I see. And so, just you might have covered this earlier, so I don't know if like people have joined. Like, what's the key like differentiation between like AP2, like the payment part of A2A and X402?
Yeah. So with the X402 spec, we're bringing out like kind of a V2 of it here soon, but the X402 has two portions to it. There's an extension that's kind of the standalone, where your agents don't really need to implement AP2. They can just do a pretty traditional X402 exchange using A to A specific objects and like the specific A to A extension. Um, but then there's also an embedded flow where these X402 objects that are provided by this A to A extension can be used in different like kind of payment frameworks as well. So these X402 flows can be kind of like wrapped within this AP2 flow. So the user gets like the auditability of the AP2 and kind of like the trust. So as along with the X402 like purchasing power portion. So and both kind of have like this signing portion where an X402, the payment payload has to be signed by the user's wallet for it to be settled. But there's also verifiable credentials in the AP2 portion that like indicate that a user approved a certain thing. So I think these could also be grouped together where if these VCs were maybe provided by like a government issuing provider or something, then X402 could also be used, and that payment could be settled with a merchant that might require both for like, let's say like a KYC like regulation or something, so that these mandates show that this a real user was present with an identity that was government issued, but they can use a wallet that might not be necessarily assigned to anything, and the merchant can still achieve like any kind of KYC regulation or anything like that.
Got it. Okay. Eric, did you raise your hand?
I did, yeah. I want to make sure there's a lot of like terms and jargon in the this entire space, and so maybe to like give 30 seconds of like explaining all
Yeah. Yeah, please do.
the acronyms. The so 8A is the agent to agent protocol, and so folks might be familiar with MCP, which is the Model Context Protocol. Uh, Model Context Protocol standardizes how agents communicate with tools. A to A standardizes how agents communicate to other agents. And so, and then what we did with Google is we created a standard way to use the existing transport that A to A provides and the existing patterns of communication between these agents to communicate X402 payments. And so you can use the X402 types and mechanisms within A to A to let an agent pay another agent in a very standard way. Google also has AP2, which is the agent payment protocol, which provides additional trust and other mechanisms of payment and ecosystem and metadata and KYC and agent on behalf of systems that you can use X402 with as a payment mechanism or you can use other payment tokens and other standards as well. So hopefully I nailed the definition there, Jordan. Let me know if I got
Yeah, yeah,
anything incorrect.
crushed it.
Yeah, that was super helpful background because we may have people that joined, didn't hear like the prior segments. So just to give like a quick refresher on it. So that's super helpful. So I know you guys are, Eric, working on a V2 already. So do you want to like talk about like kind of what's forthcoming, or what changes, what's new, like roadmap, vision?
Yeah, totally. So V2 has been largely accepted. I think we had a big developer call last week that you were part of, Rodrigo, along with many other developers in the community. I'd like to think that had a little bit in new people hearing about X402 and then building new things on top of it. Um, V2 is really a culmination of like a lot of learnings, as in 6 months of watching X402 do real payments using real dollars. And so there's nothing in it that fundamentally breaks X402. We're not modifying any of the schemes or the existing implementations of schemes across different networks. What we're doing is really refining the types and refining a couple of the mechanisms to make them a little bit more ergonomic, to prevent having to repeat as much data, to unlock a few new use cases that we think need to be better served, such as identity or return visitors. And then probably the headline feature is that we are more formally adding a concept of extensions into X402 to allow people to move more quickly and to do more experimentation within the protocol. And we'll have a set of kind of official but optional extensions that are kind of anointed and will be represented in the reference SDK. Uh, but we want to give people a way to not deviate from the core X402 mechanisms, but add like auxiliary functionality that provides value. And so one of those is a mechanism for identifying an agent. This isn't like, a concept of KYC or like a mechanism of like, proving anything about the agent. It's just being able to tell if the same agent has come to you more than one time. And if you've served them already, maybe you give them a discount, right? You might want to do things like that. And then we're also substantially refactoring the SDK to be more ergonomic, easier for folks to contribute uh, to have like better abstractions so that it's easier to add more chains. And the other thing I'd shout out is we're pushing towards the moving X402 into a foundation, which is a thing I think people have been missing in this last week. But there's still more to come on that. We're working with the Linux Foundation and a bunch of other folks to figure out what the most optimal place for X402 to live is. But we're hoping to have that out before Thanksgiving, ideally.
Oh, nice. Meaning, so by Thanksgiving you'll have the spec out and for review. The V2.
V2 is already finalized and development's underway. I think we're actually going to have the first V2 release in probably a week and a half.
Okay.
But the foundation, I think we'll announce like what the exact structure and what the how the foundation's governed and all the details about the foundation around Thanksgiving.
Oh, I see. Okay, perfect. So Jordan, is there anything on the Google side in terms of like V2 or like refinements or things coming down the pike?
Yeah, I think we'll have to stay in stride with the X402 V2 updates, and then maybe eventually rolling over the A2A repo for X402 into maybe the X402 Foundation as well, and kind of turning that all over to that. And then, yeah, there are also some V2 plans for the AP2 portion as well, kind of some changes on how the mandates will work, and maybe looking into kind of more of uh, a similar approach to maybe some ZK proof form where not all of the agents interacting with the mandates need to get the entire scope of information from the mandate itself. So it could be a little more discerning with how the mandates function within that. So yeah, there's that's currently in works.
Okay. Cool. I know we've seen a lot of action on the x402 side. What's been happening on the A2A side in terms of uptake and like developers? I know Kevin Jones was at a AI Agents for Good event at the Google headquarters, and it was like a bunch of people coming to like build agents in a day type of thing. And so, yeah, what are you seeing on the Google side in terms of like people building agents using A2A?
Yeah, a lot of kind of like hackathon projects similar or like in the space. A lot of development definitely in like Vertex AI and like launching your agents there and having them be able to support 8A and be able to interact with other agents. We're seeing some other companies pop up as well, such as like Questflow and Virtuals. We've kind of like had early discussions with where they have a bunch of agents as well that are also using X402 maybe to pay each other. These connected agents might provide like data pipelines or just kind of like service other requests. And they kind of have a discovery portion to it. So the agents are already connected or there are ways to connect. We also are seeing like a lot of growth and interest in the ERC 8004 that Marco talked about and how as like these agent networks grow, how the discoverability aspect of it will be handled and kind of like the whole trust and like reputation will be handled. And I think it's, yeah, a really great way for there to be kind of like a decentralized trust system and discovery for the agents. And so I think the community's had a lot of interest around that as well. So yeah, exciting to see all of these technologies like converge and like really gain a lot of public interest right now.
Yeah, super exciting. Yeah, Eric, I mean, X402 is like blown up, like you said, in the last couple of weeks. And so are you surprised by it? Or are you like, did you expect this kind of uptake? Like what's the, also with you and like within Coinbase and everybody else, like what are the thoughts around what's happening?
Well, it's super exciting to start with. Obviously, it makes my job explaining the potential a lot easier when I can point to charts that look like a step. Um, it's a really interesting. What's been really interesting to me and really uh, gratifying to a large degree is like, of course, in crypto, you're going to see a bunch of these like meme coin launchers and all sorts of other use cases that people have been spinning up. To be honest, I'm surprised it took people this long to realize that you could just like send a token after receiving an X402 payment. Um, but what's been really, really interesting and I've really loved to see is like more and more tool use and that like API access, content access, kind of these non-crypto related use cases have also absolutely blown up in the last couple of weeks. And you're starting to see things that are like a combination of the two, and people are really taking the time to engage with the technology and like build new things and add them to their existing products. And that's been amazing to see. And we're starting to see more agents that are kind of like a combination of different X402 tools kind of being combined and getting this kind of like Lego brickification of these tools, because now you don't need to go and create a million API keys to build an agent. You can just have it pay for like all the things that it needs to use. So that's really great. I think the thing that I'm always, the line I always feel like I need to tread is like, if X402 is just a crypto thing, it's not going to reach its maximum potential. Like the maximum potential of X402 is becoming the open standard for how all payments are done on the internet, regardless of if that's by people doing things in the crypto ecosystem or people doing things that are in Web 2. And they might be using stable coins under the hood, but they just think that, hey, I'm spending money, right? And that is like, I think, the risk of it almost becoming too cryptoified in the eyes of people who have a negative opinion about crypto for a variety of reasons. And so that's the thing that I'm always trying to make sure is clear to folks when I talk to them is like, hey, like there's so much utility here and there's so much real value and unlock of things that were not possible before X402. And there's always going to be noise, but look at all these like novel things that are getting built that just were not possible before.
Do both of these both of these systems envision like fiat interconnection? So like to an end user, they're still like using their credit card, and that the stablecoin part is totally like invisible to them.
I think with an x402, at least, we're definitely going to have fiat mechanisms over time. And I think what will happen is there'll be just be competition. Like the best way of moving money will win. And, you know, the fiat has distribution. And so I can imagine fiat uh, is like the early leader. And then as more and more folks onboard and onto stable coins and kind of use more modern rails and ways of moving money, you'll see that invert. And, uh, but what's really essential is like you as a merchant should be able to accept both. Like whatever they have that they want to pay you with, you should accept. It shouldn't be like, oh, if you're using x402 to accept payment, you can't use, these like payment token standards that are popping up, or you can't use these other things that actually have consumer usage and, are a way for you to make money. You shouldn't really care as a merchant if you're accepting stablecoin or some token or some, fiat-based mechanism. And I don't think it's on me to make the choice of like what people accept. It's if x402 is actually going to be neutral and open, any payment mechanism on the planet, whether it's blockchain based or other, should be able to participate.
Yeah. So we're getting close to time. I think Kevin was going to hop back on, and there was, I think, some Q&A questions that came up, and then we'll wrap.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. That was awesome. I mean, this has been just such an epic day of live streaming with you guys. So thanks so much for the time. So yeah, we do have a couple of questions I think that we can ask just to fill up the last, if you guys are okay with that. One of the questions was what use cases or like verticals for like agent to agent do you think are going to be the most adopted in the next like 5 years? I guess maybe this one's probably more for Jordan. What you think for this agent to agent architectures, and what do you think we're going to see come out of this architecture? This really changes the game.
Yeah, I think it it's pretty game changing in like the like task distribution. I think that's like pretty large, and you're not going to be able to. You don't need to develop all the agents that are going to yourself that are going to be managing these tasks. So I think like the what an agent can achieve is going to just get like more and more complicated with like the help of other agents. I think there's like the merchant side also introduces a lot of really interesting kind of like new concepts as far as like how we pay maybe like in microtransactions for like small things, or how an agent can maybe do additional negotiations on behalf of its clients, maybe that are connected with other agents to maybe strike up wholesale deals with like retailers, or like there's a whole new like kind of negotiation structure that could be introduced in like these networks that a client wouldn't typically be like exposed to. So yeah, I think a lot of like kind of endless opportunity here, but I do think there's new ways in which we'll like engage with commerce that is going to be kind of unlocked with A2A frameworks.
Awesome, great. And then we have one more question here. As like 402, A2A, and like other ecosystems are starting to evolve, like ERC 8004, and like there's a bunch of stuff going on with like ENS now with getting involved, MetaMask. What do you think is going to be the biggest hurdle to get like all of these ecosystems to work together and go from like just like prototyping stuff to like actual like getting adoption, like broad adoption? This is kind of an open question, I guess. Maybe Erik, if you want to dive into this one.
I mean, social consensus, right, is always going to be the answer here. And I think what's been great to see is I think we all agree that it's just these are technologies that there's plenty of opportunity for, and ultimately we need these to be open standards. And to some degree, there's like an open versus closed race happening right now, especially on the payment side. And it's I think the frame is not like, oh, there needs to be like 15 different standards, at least from the x402 standpoint. It's like, let's have a meritocracy of ideas. let's make efforts in the standard to allow for more experimentation, and to let people who have like the best ideas prove them out in the market and then accept them into the protocol. But ultimately, I think it's just having these kind of conversations, right? It's like the making sure that people are talking to each other, and that there's not a reason why someone's like, oh, I'm not being heard, and so I'm gonna like, fork off and do something else, and make sure that we're clear on like the vision here, which is like what we did in the 80s and 90s is we created the World Wide Web, and it was not a default that we would end up with all these open standards in the World Wide Web and the internet that we now have today. In fact, like AOL had a very big early lead in terms of how people used the internet. And if we don't kind of all work together and kind of end up unifying on standards, we're going to end up with the AOLification of AI, where it's these closed ecosystems you need permission to access that end up being how these AI agents are built and how they operate and pay each other. And you as a developer can't just like spin up an agent and like start monetizing it and have it do stuff on your behalf. Which is like, it's kind of a miracle that happened with the internet, right? That like any person with a laptop on earth can just create a website. And so, my major goal is just make sure that that happens with AI.
Amazing. Yeah, that's a good response. The AOL of AI sounds very scary. I'm not going to lie. Being someone who has used AOL, I know exactly what you mean. I'm dating myself here, but great. All right, Rodrigo, did you have anything you wanted to add there?
No, just I think, yeah, we're a bit over time anyway. And so, yeah, I wanted to thank you guys for joining and taking the time. I think this is super valuable. It'll be obviously recorded and shared, but it was excellent to hear directly from the people that, wrote the specs, that are involved, and get the, the backstory and the history and like why it's important. So this will be something that people can go back and listen to and hear to get the context on why it's so important. So, yeah, I think this was time well spent. And again, thank you for spending time with us and for tuning in. And yeah, we're very excited about the prospects here. It's still early, and we just see exponential growth ahead.
Thank you so much, guys.
Yep.
Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Al.
Thanks, everyone.